It is my privilege to welcome here today and to present to you Michael Gutierrez, currently serving as the president of Sacramento City College, but your third finalist today for the position of superintendent president for Hartnell College. Michael Gutierrez.
Thank you, Stan. So members of the board, faculty, classified professionals, students, community members, welcome to today's forum. My name is Michael Gutierrez, and I am a hopeful superintendent president here at Hartnell College. And what I want to talk to you this afternoon is about my why. Why is it that I work at community colleges? Why is it that I do what I do? And this question was posed to me in 2014. I was doing a video for a college that I was working for, and the theater tech asked me, why is it that you do what you do? Why do you work at community colleges? And it stumped me. I gave some random answer, but that evening it was really gnawing at me that I couldn't really answer the question. And so in my thinking that night, I thought, well, it really stems from when I was in high school, and it's not going to last that long, right? Anybody that starts off in high school, it's a really long story, but it's not that long. So when I was in high school, I took a career assessment test. You remember those that, or at least some of you remember when you bubble it in, it gets mailed off, and 6 weeks later you get the results. Well, the results I got were that I'm supposed to be a social worker. And then I looked at how much a social worker makes, and I was like, ugh. Right, and I went to a high school that at that time, my freshman year, 10% of the students were going to college, any college. And many of those that went weren't successful. So I thought I was going to go to college, but there was a lot of pressure that I felt to be successful. And so I thought if I'm going to go to college, I should at least make some money. And so I have this internal conflict. I go to college, not sure what I want to major in. I end up graduating, go to graduate school, go to public policy school. My first job is in the state of Texas, a state agency, and I hated it. I hated working for the state agency. And part of it was because I also learned about myself that I had this yearning, this need to give back to my community. I grew up in South San Antonio, and I had this feeling that I need to give back. But I thought then that my community was South San Antonio, and I learned something different later. And so I finally took a job at a nonprofit organization that connected me with community colleges. I traveled around the country and visited quite a few. And then I said, you know what, I think I'm going to give a community college a try. And so I started applying. And my first job at a campus was at North Lake College in Irving, Texas. And once I set foot on campus, I knew I was home. I knew it. And the reason why, by definition, a community college looks like the community it serves. Hartnell College looks like our community, right? Our centers look like the community. That college looked like its community. And so I've made an effort, an intentional effort that wherever I work, I will live in the service area so that I can feel like I'm giving back to the community that I serve. And then to the other point, we're like the Statue of Liberty for higher education. We have students that are valedictorians and salutatorians. We have students that barely graduated from high school. We have students that didn't graduate from high school. We have students that are trying to learn English for the first time. We have students that are unemployed, that are underemployed, that are trying to upskill. That's missionary work. That feels like social work. And so I feel fulfilled in my work that I can give back to the community and that I have missionary work. And that's why I do what I do. And I'm Michael Gutierrez.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. For the benefit of our online viewers, I want to point out to you, Mr. Gutierrez, that it would be best if you remain roughly in between the two rows of chairs there in the front so that they can still see you. Everybody wants to see you.
I've been here 10 minutes and I'm already in trouble.
You're good. You're good at the podium.
Okay,
But if you move around, just kind of stay in the row, in that front row there between the chairs.
Okay,
All right,
in case I want to write notes, I've got my little.
no problem. Okay, first question. What experience and what plans do you have for serving marginalized communities? For example, undocumented students, formerly or currently incarcerated students, rural communities. But the base of the question, what experience and what plans do you have for serving marginalized communities?
So I've worked at 6 community colleges. 4 of them have been Hispanic serving institutions, just like Hartnell College. Early in my career, I was a dean of resource development and had the opportunity to write a Hispanic serving institution grant, a Title V grant. And we were the first college in the Dallas County Community College District back in 2001 to get a grant such as that. And I eventually became the inaugural director. And part of that grant, the inaugural grant, was to bring in students that came from marginalized backgrounds, specifically Latinos and Latinas, Latinx, to connect them with STEM areas, in particular math, and to succeed in math. And since then, at that particular time, I was also the sponsor for LULAC. And we got the National LULAC Chapter of the Year during that time period. And so as I've moved forward into my career, we have focused on many activities that connect with the marginalized communities. At Dallas County Community College District, we were the first district in the state of Texas to begin offering in-district tuition for undocumented students, which then eventually led to a statewide piece of legislation that many other states decided to copy. And so that's my background, where I come from. Currently at Sacramento City College, we have 2 faculty in sociology that have started the Reemerging Scholars Program. And that should be a familiar name because that program works with formerly incarcerated students, and we cohort them. We just don't let them register at large, and we take them first in an 8-week course in sociology and then another course in human development, and we keep them together where they form community. And that term is key, community, because whether it's undocumented students, foster youth, recently incarcerated, having that consistency in staff is critical. When you look at our program at Sacramento City College for our Dream Center, we've had consistency in staff, and we serve more students than any in the Los Rios Community College District by a lot. And so that consistency is something, and that knowledge of that consistency is what I can bring forward to you as President Superintendent at Hartnell College.
Very good. Please share what you have done to improve the equity goals at your current institution, specifically helping disproportionately impacted student populations.
Closing the equity gaps is probably some of the hardest work that we will ever do in community colleges. The work is grimy. It's hard. You have to get dirty to get involved into this work. And the example that I'm going to give, and something that I'm most proud of, is the work that we've done with guided pathways, in part because of the results. And we have at Sacramento City College mapped out our course maps. We have also done the meta majors, but more importantly, we decided to focus on a first-year experience as we onboard our students. So first, our students come to a city jam, and then they're connected to a summer bridge, and eventually to the first-year experience, in particular, a freshman seminar course. The freshman seminar course did not exist at the college, so we had to go through the process of creating the course. And so we engaged the faculty through the academic senate, through the curriculum committee, to not only develop the course, but approve the course. That course also integrated student services and instruction, because the course is an interdisciplinary course that can be taught by any faculty in whatever division. So it creates synergy across the college. And so in that freshman seminar course, there is a student success coach that is embedded in each section so that they work with the students day one, connecting them to other students, connecting them to the resources at the college, and they stick with them, not just in the first semester, but to the second semester and the second year. Also, counselors are connected by meta major. And so the students are brought into the freshman seminar course that serves as the anchor, and then they are given 4 other courses, math and English in their first year, right? So if we're familiar with the student-centered funding formula, taking math and English is one of the metric points, right? One of the momentum points. And so all of this is to connect the students and make them feel welcomed at the college, but also to create academic momentum. It's critical that we establish academic momentum. The more credits they accumulate, the more likely they are to graduate. And so the students go from the first semester, the first year, and they're carried over into graduation with the hope of retaining them at higher levels. And so this is a way that we have closed the equity gaps, and the results so far are promising because right now we're in the prototype using the early momentum metrics, the early data results to scale up. And so for the first time really in my career, we've seen the closing of the equity gaps substantially. And so when we see course success numbers with our Black African-American students, in course success, the equity gap is at about 15%. But those that are in the first year experience, not just in the first year seminar, but their entire course load, that equity gap close to 6%. That's tremendous. For Latino, Latina, Latinx, the equity gap in course success is about 9%. Those in the freshman seminar taking a full course load, that first year, it closed to, it's negligible. So we use that information to scale up. So our first prototype is at 750 students. Phase 2 will be 50 sections and about 1,500 with the intent that phase 3 will be all first time in college students. So that's something that's happened college-wide. It's integrated all aspects of the college and it's involved all the constituencies as well on our campus.
Thank you. With the need to meet mandatory accreditation standards, what are your plans for supporting library services at our educational centers over the next couple of years?
So I'm quite familiar with the accreditation standards now in 2 different states. When I was a dean, the college that I was at, one of the sister colleges was put on warning status, and the president and the vice president were fired. And when I was a faculty, my vice president got asked to be the president as an interim, and she asked me to join her. And this was the second time in a 5-year period that the institution was put on warning status. And it was quite an endeavor, as you can imagine. Then now so we worked the first 6 months trying to just get off of warning status. We did that and eventually we became reaccredited. And so right now, the institution that I'm at, we're going through the new accreditation standard, the formative summative approach. And so we're currently going through our formative phase where we've had a tri-chair model, a chair consisting of a classified professional, administrator, and a faculty that lead the steering team and develop and work with other teams, sub-teams, to develop our self-study or our ISER. And so we have gotten to the point where it's been reviewed and we've received our core inquiries. We've had a forum, and we're going to begin sharing them with the college. And I give you this information to let you know that I have quite a bit of experience in accreditation in 2 different states. And specifically for libraries, information literacy is critical for what we do for student success. And so having access to them, whether it's here at the main campus or at our centers or online, right? That's one of our growing populations. It's critical that students have similar services as any of the main campus students. So it is a priority that we have that as a service for our students.
Very good. How will you elevate the morale of faculty and staff and earn the trustees' support for you in this process?
Morale is an interesting thing because there are some people that say, well, morale is personal. You can have low morale or high morale, but if you work at an institution that there is low morale, that's not what people want to hear. So a way to begin building trust is by building and making connections. So what I would do as your superintendent president, and I was talking to the board this morning about this, that John Maxwell talks about that people will not care about what your vision is until you make your personal connections first. People don't care what you know until they know you care. And so my first step will be to make the personal connections with my direct reports, with the constituencies, with the board of trustees on an individual basis, with our community, our education partners, our business partners, our community-based organizations, so that they can get to know me as a person, know what drives me, and I can do the same thing with them, so that little by little, we can begin establishing trust, so that when you begin and have those personal connections, then once the decisions are starting to be made and they're consistent and you're not all over the place, that's how you start building trust little by little. It's one step at a time, right? What do they say about eating an elephant? It's one bite at a time. We're not going to magically have trust if it doesn't exist. It's going to have to happen incrementally.
Next question. What is your vision for the future structure of the workplace as we move now toward a post-pandemic environment? For example, the 8 to 5 workday, possibility of flex work days, possibility of alternate work shifts, etc.
That is a complex answer, but I can tell you that in 3 days during the pandemic, people didn't think we could do it, but we pivoted and went online very quickly. And so it's possible. So with the Board of Trustees and their wisdom and communication with the constituencies, we can figure out a plan of what makes sense for Hartnell College. It's true, right? We've worked online. We can make things work online or in a remote fashion. But while you gain some things, so for example, I have office hours, once, sometimes twice a month, and they're on Zoom. And the attendance is great. It's about 50 people that show up. When I had them face-to-face, it was really low. So people like the convenience of it. But you also lose things, right? You lose that interpersonal connection with individuals. And so while we need to have flexibility, we need to figure out what areas can be moved to remote and stay remote. What makes sense? Which ones don't? And I don't have the answer to that because we're in the same situation that you are as well. In fact, you're more on ground right now than we are at Los Rios Community College District. And so it is really incumbent upon myself as the superintendent president, again, working with the board and the constituencies to see what makes sense, what's fair, what's equitable, and what's more importantly, productive, so that we still create a welcoming environment for our students so that they make Hartnell College the college of first choice.
Okay. Share an example from your experience where you cultivated community support into a positive partnership. And what would you do at Hartnell to establish those relationships?
Can you repeat the question?
Share an example from your experience where you cultivated community support into a positive partnership. And what would you do at Hartnell to establish those relationships?
In my previous role, the service area that I worked in happened to have 3 of the lowest performing high schools in Dallas Independent School District, 3 of the lowest 5. And what we decided to do first was establish partnerships between the college and the high school. And we developed an early college high school. And this was Samuel High School, which was losing many of its students to the Magnet High School. And so we built what's called a school within a school, so that the first 2 years happened at the high school and the next 2 years happened at the college. And so what started to happen is it started to transform the community. There started to be pride in the high school. And for the first time, and God knows how long, someone that the Magnet School was their home school chose to go to Samuel. And the principals just started crying because that was transformative. So that was the first iteration. The next iteration with the second school was a Pathways to Technology high school. So the difference with an early college and high school and a Pathways to Technology high school is there's a business partner. And this business partner was AT&T and eventually grew to 2 other business partners. So this Pathways to Technology high school worked with our faculty to determine which programs AT&T would like to participate in so that potential graduates could be applying to their company. And so it was IT and business. And so our faculty worked with AT&T in the high school to see if any modifications needed to be made in the curriculum. And there was very little that needed to be done. And it was still the school within a school model. But what happened was AT&T started to provide mentoring to the students as freshmen in high school. As sophomores, they started to do job shadowing. As juniors, they started to visit the company and do some volunteer work. As seniors, they started to do experiential learning where they had internships and they had apprenticeship opportunities, so that when they were graduating, they either had an associate degree, an applied associate degree, or a certificate at the very least, and then be able to apply at AT&T. And so that was transformative for the community, because when you start thinking about us here, and you think about our community members that need to be educated and trained, you think about our housing shortages here and in California, you look at the traffic patterns that you see in the Bay Area. The last thing we want is to have to bring in more people to take more of the housing and create more traffic when we have our human capital here. And so those are 2 examples of something that transformed an entire community in some of the lowest performing high schools in the Dallas area.
Thank you. This is a 2-part question. Please share a strategy from your experience that has increased enrollment in the current environment. And the second part is share a strategy from your experience that has helped increase retention.
So the increased enrollment part, it's a tough one for me because I work at an urban institution right now and our enrollments are going down. But what we've noticed, and you notice this when you do strategic enrollment management, that when you break your population into subpopulations, what you start to figure out is that not all your enrollments are declining. Parts are increasing, and parts are at status quo. And so for us, an area that has done particularly well at Sacramento City College has been the online courses where our faculty had gone through the online teaching academy. Pre-pandemic, our online teaching academy, those faculty that had gone through that, the course success rates were about average to all the other courses. What we also noticed as we dug in deeper that most of those students were over the age of 25. And so what we're doing now is trying to figure out how those that were under the age of 25 can gain experience in online if that's what they want to do. So we have to do hybrid courses so they can get a little bit of opportunity in that environment. Because if we're going to offer online courses, they have to be high quality courses because we want that experience to be a good one. And it's a challenge because we want more on-ground courses, and during the pandemic, it sort of flipped things for us. So it's a tough time period, and we know that the balance is difficult, but we know that online is here to stay. And if we're going to offer it, we need to make sure it's of high quality. And so the second part of the question is
Increasing retention.
Increasing retention. And so there was a pretty traumatic experience at Sacramento City College that involved hate speech in the classroom that ultimately impacted a program that we've done. And I've given you an example of our guided pathways, right? That's doing that, but I'm going to give you a different example so that it's not repetitive. And what happened is in the bathroom, there were swastika symbols, the N-word, and the words, kill them all. And it probably happened over the weekend, and it was reported at the college. And the college, I had been there 3 months, and the college probably reacted the way it normally did, which I'm not defending, but it was reported. Facilities was called to go clean it up. Facilities looked at it and said, oh, wow, this is way worse than what we thought. They called the college police. And so what happened was it was never blocked off. And so students are still going into the bathroom, and it's 2017. And what did students do? They take pictures and post them on social media. So it blew up. So this is Monday. Come Tuesday, I still don't even know it. And I get a call from the PIO and says, you really need to get back to the college. And I'm like, why? What's going on? There's protests right outside of the bathroom. She explained the situation. So I get there, and there's a large protest going outside. There's news media there. And I have to face it. I have to apologize to our community, apologize to our students for what happened. And what I did next was meet with our students, meet with community members, and talk to them about what's the next steps. And so we ended up having several listening sessions and then student forums. And I asked our college to listen. Let's not talk. And it's hard for us to just listen, right? Because we want to solve. That's in our nature. But I asked them just to listen. And this is what our students told us. They said, I don't feel safe at your college. I don't feel welcomed. I don't want to come back. In fact, I'm going to tell my brother and sister not to go to Sac City College. I'm going to tell all my friends that it's not a safe and welcoming place to be. And when you spend your entire career trying to create a safe space, it hurts. In fact, it still hurts me now. And it's a personal reckoning to have to go through that. So I thought really long and hard for a long time about this. And eventually, we sent a team to Odessa College. And if you're familiar with the work at Odessa, they have something called the Drop Rate Improvement Program. It's 4 commitments that they have for their institution. And their crisis was not hate speech. Their crisis was in 2007. They were about to close. And so they created this Drop Rate Improvement Program. And so we sent a team of faculty, and they came back and they said, we really like their work, but we're not going to plop those 4 commitments in our college. We want to do the research ourselves and replicate the research. And I said, okay. So we had a faculty replicate the research, which was take the top 19 faculty with the lowest drop rates. And so she contacted them for an interview. 13 responded and asked them the question, why do students stay in your class? What we did a little different from Odessa is we also interviewed the students, and there were about 400 students in those classes, and asked them the question, why do you stay in your class? And the information was correlated, and we came up with our version of 4 commitments, which we call City Ways. And these commitments are things that you probably can recognize, but the difference is that it is for Sac City College, by Sac City College, faculty for Sac City College students. And it is learning the names of your students in the first 2 weeks of class, connecting with your students outside of class and getting to know what their goal is, communicating with your faculty through different mediums, providing easily and accessible materials. And for the pandemic, that's critical, right? Having that easily accessible materials. And the focus of that is to increase the retention of the students and increase the course success rates. And I'll give you one specific example. At the time, the Faculty Senate President, who's now the Dean of Planning Research and Institutional Effectiveness, at the time, she still is a huge equity warrior, looked at her disaggregated data and said, wow, my course success rates, they're not great. They're in the 50s. And disaggregated, I'm appalled at my own numbers. And so she decided to do the work, the commitment, City Ways. And so she did it for the 2 sections that she was teaching while Senate President, and her course success rates went into the 80s, and the equity gaps closed significantly. And so what does that do? The whole point of this is to create this welcoming environment where students feel connected. If you think back to the time when you were in college and you were taking class, and you think of your favorite instructor, there's probably 2 things that you remember about them. You probably know their story, and they probably remembered your name. So that's an example of a retention effort.
Thank you. Hartnell enjoys one of the top performing foundations in the state. What is your experience in supporting foundation efforts towards student success?
So my role as the superintendent president is to make sure that I don't screw up the foundation and get in the way, right? If you're making $10 million a year through the foundation, that's pretty significant. But how can I complement the work that is taking place? And I think that's pretty significant in what we can do. So together with the Board of Trustees, through the strategic plan, it can be made very clear on what to focus on with fundraising. So that's the first step. The second step is I have to be present and make those connections with our community. The third step is that if we're having a capital campaign, is to connect with the existing donors that we already have. The fourth step is that what's great about a capital campaign, if we have one going on, is that there are new opportunities to connect with people that maybe have not donated yet to our college. And I think what's similar to my experience at Sacramento City College and here at Hartnell is they're both over 100 years old. And so what a great opportunity for us to do planned giving. And planned giving is a really interesting thing. You have to be really patient for one, right? But when you meet with potential donors, they become your best advocates. Because when you bring them in, you ask them the question, when you pass away, what are you going to do with your resources? Do you want to give 50% to Uncle Sam? Or do you want to give that 50% to something that you really love? And why not Hartnell College? And so through that planned giving effort, we were able to procure a $4 million gift. Now, we're going to have to wait for it, but we've received other gifts in that format. And so that's a really powerful way for us to bring money in. And again, with so many alums, so many generational alums and emeriti, that's a place that we can also complement with what's going on. The other, and I'm going to go outside because the foundation already does a pretty wonderful job, is how we treat our locally elected officials. Tip O'Neill talked about all politics is local. And so how do we bring our local politicians onto our campus? And what do we do with them once they're here? Where we nurture that relationship just like we do with the donors. We find out what their passion points are. And for us, as we've nurtured a relationship with one particular assembly member, we connected and found out that a passion point was veterans. And the other was basic needs. And so we got a $2.4 million gift to enhance our veteran center and to build our basic needs center to expand our storage space and our refrigeration capability. And then on top of that, we ended up getting another $1 million for our child development center because of the relationship we get nurtured. And so I also mentioned earlier our Reemerging Scholars Program. There was a connection there with our faculty and a senator, a state senator. And right before the pandemic, we were about to get a gift. And then they said, you know, we really like your model. And so now there's a statewide model. I don't know if you've seen it, to apply for grants for Reemerging Scholars. It's based off of the Sac City College cohort. So those relationships, whether they're private or public, are both essential and critical and can be lucrative to our college.
Can you share from your experience leading a campus-wide collaboration specifically related to providing academic support services such as tutoring and supplemental instruction? Leading a campus-wide collaborative effort to support tutoring and/or supplemental instruction.
You know, I mentioned earlier what we're doing with our guided pathways work. And while embedding a tutor is not, embedding a student success coach is not exactly truly supplemental instruction, it is similar to that. It's the same concept. But as a vice president of instruction, when I was at Eastfield College, what we did was we recognized that there were many tutoring entities on the college, but they were all at different parts. And we ended up not centralizing everything, but try to co-locate them as much as possible so that students would have a clear space for tutoring to enhance the services and the connections. And so what we then did is use some of that tutoring money to do supplemental instruction. And so we started embedding the tutors into the classroom, specifically in math and in science. And what we learned from that is that if you're going to do this, you've got to really be all in. And the faculty have to be really all in, because if you have tutors that sometimes go to the class, it doesn't work. You have to have these supplemental instruction tutors go day in and day out so that you can see, again, these connections with the students, that comfort, that trust, so they can advance in their work. And so it's been my experience to do that quite a few times in my career, but also with tutoring. It's something that it's important for our students, and it's something that really impacts the success of what they do.
Thank you. We have just a couple more.
Okay.
How will you support and work with Hartnell's current efforts surrounding equity?
Can you repeat the question?
How will you support and work with Hartnell's current efforts surrounding equity?
So I think the first thing that I would do is to, as I arrive in my first 6 months, is make those personal connections and find out exactly what we're doing in terms of the equity work at Hartnell. Because I can tell you from our college, there's a lot that we're doing, but some of it is a little uneven. And so what I would like to do is determine, where are we at? Do we have a common vocabulary for equity? Have we been trained on a common vocabulary? Do we have data fluency here through our institutional research office? Do we have a dashboard system that's easily accessible by everyone, where we can get our data in a disaggregated way? In our convocations, you will see me talk about data quite a bit in a disaggregated way so that we can see our brutal facts, right? If you're going to do equity work, you've got to see your own data. You've got to see where you're at, because if you don't, there's no way for you to advance. And so we have to be unafraid to look at our own data. At Sacramento City College, we focused on 3 things: communication, professional development, and capacity building. Those 3 things to eventually get us all data fluent to the point where each area sees their data in a disaggregated manner. Each faculty is able to see their data in a disaggregated manner in a password protected format. It took a lot of negotiation with the unions, but we made it happen. The union was quite concerned that we might use that data for the evaluation, and that was not the case. The reason why we wanted everyone to look at our data is to create awareness and to create equity plans. And so that awareness is something that I'll investigate and look at it. Do we have that? Do we have the capacity? And if we don't, we will communicate, we will do professional development, and we will increase our capacity to look at our own data.
Thank you. This final question is a hypothetical. As president of Hartnell College, what would be the top 3 items on your list of accomplishments by year 3?
The top 3 accomplishments. So the first thing that I would like for us to eventually do is to look at what we're doing at our guided pathways work. And the state talks about it's really important to increase the number of graduates that are transferring to UC and CSU and the number of students that are going into the workforce. And I'm going to say that that's not enough. Where we need to start is it's the post-graduation success numbers. How are our students doing once they graduate, when they transfer to CSU and UC? Are they successful? When we look by program and we disaggregate the data, are they successful? When they get an applied associate degree, how are they doing in the workforce? When we disaggregate the data, are they successful? Right? It's this equity value perspective of who's getting the credentials, and those that are getting the credentials, what are they doing with it? Those are the two questions. And so that's the first thing, is to have the capacity to see how our students are doing. So that would be the first thing. The second thing is, talked about it earlier, the best way to increase enrollments is to keep the students you already have. And so through our guided pathways work, through our vision of having this welcoming environment, right? Making sure students are first, that we're retaining the students that we have. And so we increase not only the course success of those, but we're keeping them regardless of location and modality. And then the third thing is, and it involves enrollment management, is making those connections with our students early. Like in third grade, we're making those connections because in the Salinas Valley, if 36% of our population does not have a high school diploma and another quarter only have a high school degree, it's incumbent upon us that we connect with our students early so they have the expectation of making Hartnell their college of first choice. So we connect early, we connect often in middle school, then in high school, they have the opportunity to gain academic momentum through dual enrollment or early college high school partnerships. Again, the more credits they can accumulate, right? If they can take English and math in the first year, if they get to 15 credit hours, the likelihood of them graduating increases 30%. So it's those three areas, right? Post-graduation success, our ability to look at that and then work backwards from there, increasing the retention of the students that we have, and doing the strategic enrollment management where we're connecting with our students and creating academic momentum for them.
Very good. Thank you. We are closing in now on the final couple minutes of our 45-minute block. So I would like to invite you, Mr. Gutierrez, to share any closing remarks and comments that you would like with the audience today.
So I want to close with the power of leading through listening. And I had a transformative event that got me to this thinking of the power of leading through listening. About 2.5 years ago, I was in a pretty bad wreck, and I'm very fortunate to be with you today. Very fortunate. What I can tell you is that I was on Highway 80. I was going to one of our centers. And what I didn't know at the time, as I was hitting a traffic jam, there was somebody behind me in a Ford F-150 that had driven overnight from Idaho going to San Francisco, and they fell asleep going over 70 miles an hour and hit me from behind. And as I eventually got home from the hospital, I couldn't even tie my shoes. I had to go through speech therapy because of the pretty bad concussion that I had. Sometimes I feel like I still have it. But the community and college response, the random acts of kindness, it was humbling for me. And it really started to change how I listened. I thought I was a good listener already, but clearly I could have gotten better, and I have gotten better. And I first started to change in how I listen by being in the moment. So wherever I am, with my family, with my peers, with my college, being in the moment, right? We've all had those times where maybe we're thinking of something else when you're in a conversation or you're looking at your phone. Being in the moment. The second piece is that the college talked a lot about our work, rallied, and not only sustained the work that we were doing, but advanced it. And so what I recognized there was that I have limitations. I listened to myself and I had limitations, and I figured out that I can't go at it alone. And as your president, superintendent, I will lead by listening, by being present, and understand that by doing everything together, knowing that we need to do this collectively, we are more powerful together, we will connect with our community and succeed in what we want to do. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you this afternoon, and good luck on your search.
All right, everyone. Well, again, thank you so much for your patience and attendance today. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, we want to acknowledge all three of our finalists today, but in particular, again, thank all of you who took the time to come, and those of you who are watching online. We very much appreciate your participation and support today. This concludes the opportunity for us to have our open forums. The board will now continue the deliberative process. More information regarding their final decision will be announced soon. So we ask you all to stay tuned. Now we're in the final stages of making the final decision. More information to follow. But with that, thank you so much, everybody. Drive safe, and we are adjourned.